Off top, giraffes only sleep for about 30 minutes a day in 5-minute increments. Play the music.
This is the Domonique Foxworth Show.
Welcome to the Domonique Foxworth Show. We are going back to the basics. Me and the vanilla snack, just one-on-one conversations. I love
Run
it.
the damn ball.
There you go. There you go. We don't got to get fancy. We don't need to advance this offense. We do like the Ravens did in Monday night. Get a damn I formation and tote that thing.
What did
What's
we
up,
learn
buddy?
this season about the Ravens, the Eagles,
Yeah.
the Lions?
Yep. Keep it
Dominate
simple.
the line of scrimmage and run the damn ball.
Yep. Keep it simple. Get good at the important stuff. And that is what we are doing today. So we actually have a lot of topics to talk about. Happy Thanksgiving if you're listening to this then, because we're not doing a Friday episode, but we're going to give you a bunch of topics so it can carry you through the holiday weekend. We're not doing any sort of, like last year we did like a Thanksgiving theme sort of thing, right?
Yeah, we
No,
did a Thanksgiving food draft, but I beat your ass too badly in that. And so then we just aren't doing
we
it again.
established that it was two Americas. It's,
Paul doesn't lie.
yeah, I mean,
Well, I guess
you're-
that's a problem. Actually, the polls
Yeah.
don't lie.
Yeah.
We learned that the hard way.
Polls do not tell the truth either. Two Americas. I had a two Americas situation earlier today with my buddy Jeff. We were doing a Sports Center thing. I should clip it and share it with you, but we did. I don't know if you saw on the Monday countdown thing. There was a Ravens couple who had the guys like RC and Jason, Kelsey, and Swagoo and SVP do their gender reveal. Did you see that? There's a couple who. Okay, so a couple brought an envelope. And before the game, they passed it down to the Monday Countdown crew, and that crew read it and then yelled, 1, 2, 3, it's a boy. And that's how they did their gender reveal. Generally, I'm not a gender reveal guy, but I thought that was a kind of cool way to do it if you're a sports fan or Ravens fan. But anyway, I'm on Sports Center with Jeff, and it's, of course, you know me. I'm going for the race jokes. So it was a white couple, and I said, I can't wait for a little white Lamar to get here. And we had a good time. Jeff and I, Jeff is always game for a good uncomfortable joke. And then we ended up devolving into talking about Freddie Freeman, which my feelings on Freddie Freeman. It's unacceptable.
The baseball player?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know your feelings on Freddie Freeman at all.
Oh, well, Freddie Freeman, you can't be Freddie Freeman from Atlanta and be white. It's unacceptable. Freddie Freeman from Atlanta is a black name.
Are you aware that Jock Peterson exists and that he is a white who is the number one receiver over Devontae Adams on his high school team?
That's not as surprising to me as a man named Freddie Freeman. And maybe, I don't know, Freddie Freeman feels like an uncle. Like Freddie Freeman is working the grill in some leather sandals with a cigarette hanging halfway out his mouth and calling all the girls sweetheart. That's Freddie Freeman. I don't know if you've met Freddie Freeman, but that's the Freddie Freeman I know. It's not the guy that we saw being the best player in baseball and on the biggest stage.
God, we could do a full Freddie Freeman podcast. Remember when he just complained, being like, I was duped when I had to go to the Dodgers, and now he's just like, actually, no, that's not true. We're really good now. We're out of the
Yeah, so that moment did not want me. I didn't want Freddie Freeman in that moment. Right now, everyone to claim Freddie Freeman. Speaking of claiming, I don't know. What's the segue to this, Charlie? Like, I don't know what's going on.
Where do you want to start? So
I want to start. Yeah, we have a bunch of games to get through.
Yeah.
Or not games, but a bunch of concepts to get through and ideas in some of the games. But I do think that the most important place to start is on the heels of that Ravens game, headed into the game of the weekend. It's Ravens versus Eagles, and that game is about more than just the outcome of the game. Right, Charlie?
I'm so happy you started here because we are going to do the 3 Thanksgiving games and then our 3 favorite games of the weekend. But the Ravens-Eagles, to me, is fascinating. They're 2 of the 3 teams that we've probably bantered about more than any other teams in the NFL with that we think are good. We've talked about the Chiefs also. The Lions as well. But like of teams that are aesthetically pleasing to watch offensively, which that's a change for the Eagles. The Ravens are a team that we've talked about their offense ad nauseum and their defense, whether or not they've taken a step back and how far they are. But to me, the interesting angle when we talk about this Ravens and Eagles game, it's actually about the narrative that the MVP is going to come out of it. Because Lamar Jackson has won 2 MVPs. He is having what I think is the best season of his career. I think he's been the best quarterback in football. He has, including his rushing touchdowns, 30 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. His 3 interceptions are all on tipped or drop passes, and none of them really look to be his fault. He's just had supreme mastery of the offense. On the other side, Saquon Barkley is coming off a 300-yard game from scrimmage where he is vaulted from being behind 15 quarterbacks in the MVP odds to third. After 5 weeks of the season, we were on this show, and I mentioned on our Monday episode that I thought the Eagles were only treading water because Saquon Barkley had been so spectacular. And I got, noted running back hater Bill Barnwell, our beloved friend, looked at me like I had 3 heads because it was after he had dropped the pass. He has been the engine of what has transformed an offense to be one of the best teams in football. And I think it's really interesting because running backs don't win the MVP anymore. But if I were to say to you, do you think Saquon can win the MVP this weekend? Your thoughts would be?
Yes. And that's because the MVP is so much about big stages and big moments when everyone's watching, and we can use the now cliche that it's a narrative award, which it is. I think I've been wrestling with this all day because in actuality, it's almost impossible for the MVP not to be a quarterback. And that's a result of the changes in the game. Like, they've changed the rules to make it so passing is more efficient and quarterback play is more important. So starting from that place, the reason why it's possible is because we are willing to accept that it's a narrative award. We just have to build that narrative and can continue to sell and push that narrative, because I think fundamentally it's impossible to argue that Saquon Barkley is more valuable than the best quarterback in football, even if the best quarterback in football isn't playing well. It just so happens that the best quarterback in football is playing incredibly well right now. And Lamar Jackson, I know that we don't do counting stats here that often, but I think this is one that's worth bringing up, and it's kind of important, or it's just kind of interesting. Lamar Jackson, the last pick in the first round of the draft, the guy who we're not sure if he should be a quarterback or not, or some people said that, and it was a huge conversation. And the guy whose career early on was defined by the predicament that he put defenses in with his running ability, he is now leading the league in passing yards. That's kind of incredible and shocking and amazing. And I think it's somewhat illustrative of how impressive this season has been.
You know what's funny about this? And like you said that we don't do counting stats here. We are absolutely doing counting stats in this MVP debate. Because if Saquon Barkley breaks the rushing record and goes, if he breaks it in 16 games, we're gonna really get this going. He certainly looks like he's gonna break it in 17 games. The Dickerson record that Adrian Peterson ended up like 9 yards short of, or whatever. You know, other counting stats we're gonna
21.
do?
It's like
2107, right? I think. Or okay. We're certainly going to do counting stats if Lamar Jackson has 4,000 passing yards and 1,000 rushing yards. It's the first player to ever do that, because that is preposterous. He might account for 45 touchdowns and 4,000 passing yards and 1,000 rushing yards on his own. That's an entire offense.
It's interesting. Sorry to cut you off, but it's interesting because you're right. I think generally when we're doing analysis, you and I and most modern smart football fans recognize that counting stats can be misleading. But when you're talking about MVP, I'm good on your analytics. I want some numbers. I want some eye-popping big plays. I want some big round numbers that are worth being remembered. And I do think that part of the awards, and it's a weird thing, but part of the awards is the reason for awards is not only to celebrate these players, but I think it's to tell the story of the season, and the further you get away, the more that these give you reasons to remember this season for a particular person.
Well, and that's a really good question then. So do you think it's stupid then at this point that it is a quarterback award? Because if the Eagles continue to go on a run and play really well down the stretch and Saquon's cooking, won't one of the stories of the season be that this guy basically costs what it costs to sign a high-priced tight end? And we saw all the stuff on Hard Knocks for the Giants who were we're not going to give you a contract offer, test the market, but we might still want you around here. And a huge narrative of this year is opportunity loss for Saquon, that we lost 5 years of what could have been a historic career, and then seeing him in this system that works for him with this dominant offensive line, it's like, oh, this player is preposterously good.
Yeah. I don't know that I would say it's stupid, but it does kind of suck. And I think maybe we should lead the charge on, because that's where the argument for a most valuable player always ends up, is like, how do you define value? Mm-hmm. And if you're defining it by like its most like explicit sense, then it's impossible not to choose a quarterback because they're going to be more valuable. But if it is more about like the protagonist of the season, which is how sometimes like he's the hero. If this season was a movie, who's the person who you would be like, hey, this guy is the main character? And it's hard to determine right now, but Saquon certainly in the running. The man did a backwards hurdle, guys.
I was about to say,
backwards hurdled.
He butt hurdled someone. They're a game out of the best record in the NFC or in the NFL. Really, they're just a game back of the Lions and Chiefs. And
he's on his way. Yeah, and he's on his way to breaking the all-time record.
Should we mention the Josh Allen piece of this, which is he's first in the MVP odds currently. He's plus 150. I think Lamar's plus 250 and Saquon's plus 475. Josh Allen is a traditional narrative award person, but I think this is something that, did we sniff it out in the Domonique Foxworth Show coming into the season, which is just that Stephon Diggs was not a huge part of their offense when they went on their winning streak last year. That's not to say he was not a really good player for them for a really long time, but when we saw the 6-game winning streak, them being a couple passes away from beating the Chiefs in the playoffs, that was largely with him being a 40-yard-a-game guy on that team. And it seems like coming into the season, we decided that their offense was less talented and that Josh Allen was going to have to carry them to the promised land. And he's been excellent this year, but statistically, he's not really close to Lamar. And I'm sure impact-wise, you could argue he's very similar because of the difference in talent level in those teams. But are we overlooking that, or is he literally in this because we decided, because of the narrative before the season, that Josh Allen should be the MVP?
Yeah, I mean, it's that, and then it's the game against Kansas City.
Yeah.
Like, it's those big, like, I don't want to say prime time because that game wasn't prime time, but those big showcase games. It's those big moments when we see, I think...
Lamar won the MVP last year against Purdy on Christmas.
That's exactly what I was going to say, it was when Lamar won the MVP was when he went off against the 49ers and Purdy had a terrible game. And then it kind of solidified that Lamar Jackson was going to be the MVP, which is why I think if Saquon goes for 200 and a couple touchdowns in this game and Lamar is like, even if Lamar's just good but not great, I do think that it gives Saquon the opportunity. It's going to be tough because the Ravens defense is actually really good against the run, but it gives Saquon, he's going to grab the steering wheel a little bit.
You know what's crazy? And this is how much team success is a huge part of the award. Is you could actually just, they're 4-7, but if you're just isolating performance and stats, Joe Burrow has been right there with Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson as the best quarterback in football this year.
Absolutely. But we just don't give the MVP to a team that's, I mean, I get you. And I think baseball is a little different, right? Like baseball, they kind of just go with like the best player. You can miss the playoffs, right? And get the MVP in baseball, right?
You are taking me back to 2004. This debate has been going on since A-Rod was on the Rangers. How valuable can he be? Well, he's a shortstop who hit 54 home runs. He's pretty valuable.
I mean, that's because it's such, and it's such a individual sport. It's like,
it's an individual team sport.
You can they are completely isolated in how well they're playing. It's really easy to measure against other people. In this, you're so dependent on everyone else around you, which is why Saquon is now in the MVP conversation. Because if you wanted to make an argument for Saquon getting the MVP, the year that Daniel Jones got his contract, like that would be the year where you say, hey, this team ain't good. And somehow they've gotten to the playoffs in large part because Saquon was incredible.
So on this game, the Eagles, like we should have the game in entirety too. So the Eagles,
let's get to that.
We've had a game of the year, I think like 4 times this year. This is certainly in the game of the year dossier, our folder of games of the year. But the Eagles just have been rolling and getting better and better and better. And like, I feel like every time we talk about them, we're like, are they kind of as good as the Lions? This team's really, really good. Like, I don't really see the flaw here, except for the same flaw as the Lions is that they have a quarterback that's not going to win you the game. But he's probably not going to lose you the game. And he's elevated by the pieces around him. The Ravens, on the other hand, they took out the Chargers on Monday night, and yeah, they won by 7, but they were casually in control of that game the entire time. And that's a Chargers defense that for the last couple of weeks we've been talking about how good they are, and it was no problem for them. So when you look at this game, what do you think? Do you think that it's going to be a coronation of one of these teams, or we're going to learn that both these teams are really good and sort of in that top tier because there's no certainly dominant team this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think to the degree that like power rankings or anything like that matters, this game is going to go a long way because there's so, well, I was going to say so rarely do you get these type of matchups, but as you mentioned, we've had a lot of game of the year type of situations, and the Bills and teams change through the course of a season. And like the Bills were not great at the beginning of the season. The Ravens destroyed them. I don't think the result of the Ravens and Bills will be the same, in large part because the Bills were beating some teams that weren't that good, and then they had that matchup against the Chiefs. And that was kind of a measuring stick game to tell you like what their actual temperature is right now. And I think this fits into that category where it's like, all right, the Ravens up and down team look like they can beat the best teams in football from time to time, and then they can also lose to some bad teams. And the Steelers aren't a bad team, but they lost to the Steelers too. But this is a situation where there's no this is pretty straightforward. Whatever team wins this game, short of some random fluke, I think takes a huge step. And how they win it matters too. And it's such a great this is why this game is taking the front of game of the year matchup for me, is because it does really challenge the teams in the places that they need to be challenged.
I was about to say, doesn't this feel like strength on strength on strength? Even when you look at
it does.
Yeah.
Well, with the exception of, I see what you're saying. Yeah, the strength on strength is the offensive line and running attack of the Eagles going up against this Ravens rush defense. But the issue with this Ravens defense has been slowing down explosive plays through the air and big time receivers. Yeah, and this is going to be great. A.J. Brown is as number one as gets in this league, and they've made some changes in the secondary, and they seem to be better, the Ravens. But this is damn sure going to be a test.
I can't believe we got this far without talking about A.J. Brown, because honestly, there's just so much about this MVP debate, because the numbers, I don't have them directly in front of me, but the numbers with A.J. Brown on the field for Jalen Hurts and the Eagles offense, first when he's been injured, are staggering. Like, he's a true bona fide number one, bends the defense the way that you have to defend this team. And that's like interesting, because like that's been the note you've had all year, which is how do you stress the Ravens the out, have a number one receiver? And like that's just been over and over again, and he's right there. And on the other side of it, I kind of think it's going to be interesting to see how this Eagles defense holds up against an awesome Ravens offense, because we are very clear how much better the Eagles defense has gotten. But like, this is a real different type of test. Like, we're going to see if we can really not to go with full sports cliche trust this defense, but kind of like we're going to see how they're going to hold up against the big boys.
Yeah, this Eagles defense has been great, even against the Bengals. When we did that conversation with Mina a couple weeks ago, they played really well against the Bengals. The Bengals stress you in one way in particular. The Ravens, the thing about the Ravens, and I got into this conversation with a number of people who tried to tell me that the Ravens need to run the ball more all the time. It's like, yeah, I get it when that opportunity presents itself. Like, I also think that modern football is about creating advantages and taking advantage of those opportunities that you've created. And the Ravens, what has made their offense so special this year, is they can beat you in a bunch of different ways. And they have enough players, and Lamar is good enough. They have enough talented players, and Lamar is good enough that they're going to have an advantage somewhere on the field.
Yeah.
And they're adaptable enough to take advantage of that. I can't say advantage to capitalize on that advantage that they've created. So in this situation, it'll be interesting to me where they decide that they're going to try to pick, because the secondary is really good. The Eagles secondary is really good.
And so many
then
good
they also have
then
they also have that front that's not as great as it once was, but like Brandon Graham's playing great, and Jalen Carter's playing great, and Jordan Davis is just enormous. Like that, it's not easy and obvious. Like, going up against the Chargers was like, all right, we're gonna run it at them, and that like they try to put Derwin James at linebacker, which works most of the time. But no, we're gonna put Ricard in at fullback and run him at Derwin James, and that's going to create big holes.
I keep thinking about when Orlovsky was on the field and the Ravens' cheat code of having the 2 tight ends and Ricard on the field and how much optionality they have. And it's going to be really interesting against an Eagles defense that's so physical. That's like a uniquely physical and powerful defense. What do you want to get to next? I feel like we've exhausted Eagles Ravens.
Yeah,
and we're going to now time travel back.
Yeah, we've exhausted Eagles Ravens. You're right. I feel kind of like we don't have to pick winners, but I kind of feel like the Eagles are gonna win this game, which I don't want to say, but I kind of think it's
perfect because I actually think we've now started to take the Ravens for granted. So I'll take the Ravens side of this.
Good. I hope that's the case because the Ravens would be more fun.
This has been such a flip for me.
Well, I guess they're both in the playoffs, right?
This has been such a flip for me where I was like, the media has overrated the Ravens for years. Like last year, I didn't take them totally seriously, and now I'm just like, yeah, they lost a stupid game to the Steelers. They lost 2 stupid games at the beginning of the season. They've been lights out. We'll keep picking them.
They have been. All right, we'll stay in the division and go Steelers-Bengals, which I think is an interesting matchup. The Steelers, I think it took us a while to come around to like respect the Steelers, and they took that respect in beating the Ravens and then followed it by giving that respect back. I'm willing to forgive them when they lost to the Browns. I'm willing to forgive them snow and Thursday night. It's a situation that is the Thursday night games is not always indicative of actually how good your team is. But I think actually in this game, the Bengals are the more interesting team because they're pretty much almost out of the playoffs as it stands. But what's interesting about this game is should they lose this game, which I think they probably should lose. If they do lose this game, what do the receivers do? Both of the receivers, Higgins and Chase, who are incredible receivers and don't have their extensions. Like, do you keep putting them out there to play, or do they want to keep going out there to play? Like, I'm pretty sure my hamstring is going to tighten up real quick if we play in a lot of irrelevant games that could get me injured and hurt me getting paid.
I think that this is so fascinating because the things that Jamar Chase has on the line are important in different ways. Like, it's been reported that a lot of opposing teams view him as the best wide receiver in the NFL, even though that's a title that's been held by Justin Jefferson and Tyreek Hill. They think that the explosive nature of Chase makes him scarier. And this is also what we've been waiting for since that rookie year when he looked so explosive and he had the hip injury. He's been he's been elite every year, but not quite to the level of this year. He has a chance to win the Triple Crown. We salivated over Cooper Kupp winning the Triple Crown and how incredible it was. He was doing it at the slot. Jamar Chase would be doing it as a true X. And if you're saying, should he play the rest of the season to do that? How important is that? I'm sure it matters to him. I think it would be a fool's take to be like, oh, it doesn't matter to him to have this historic season. With that said, if they lose this game, he could sit out tomorrow. And I think you could make the case that he should sit out after the Monday after this game and be like, I'm not playing another down for this poverty franchise who doesn't want to pay people, who had to sell naming rights to the stadium to pay Joe Burrow until you give me $1 more than Justin Jefferson made on his contract. And the second part of that, with the T. Higgins part of it, they are a different offense when they have 2 good receivers. You might think T. Higgins is replaceable. Well, Mike Gesicki and Yosavas are not replaceable options for T. Higgins. And you have this offense with Joe Burrow and these guys that can compete with anyone. I know it hasn't worked out defensively, but to me, that this season, the way it's gone, should change their entire course of how they're managing this franchise and this group.
The funny thing about this is you call them a poverty franchise, which is relative to the other teams, I think is accurate. And in order to win in this league, and we talk about cap hits quite a few times, and the way that you build your roster, you have to make these decisions. You can't have too many big second contract guys on one side of the ball in one position. I get why that could be risky. And except for the fact that they've managed to have so much success like this, you don't want to have to change this model. So you're at this particular fork in the road where it's all right, do we kind of do a model where we go all in right here offensively and hope to hit in the draft a lot, because you're going to have to hit in the draft quite a few times to make it work. If you're paying 2 receivers, top of the league type of money, and a quarterback. But the poverty part is interesting because one way around, if you're looking to make a run right now, if they felt like they were close, one way around having that huge financial impact is paying a bunch of money up front, because then you can spread the cap hit out over the course of a couple years. And this may be boring to people, but a franchise that does not have the resources to pay big bonuses would have less flexibility when it comes to ways to construct a contract in order to build a roster for a quick run. But I would argue that because their defense is so bad, it doesn't feel like they're close. So, like, I get the idea of going all in if you feel like you're close. But if you're not actually close, then going all in right now and pushing like major cap hits and cap ramifications into the future feels a little bit like a gamble.
So how far are they though? Because I say that because they would be 9-2 if you just flip the results of all their 1-score games. And if you asked me, if you said snap judgment, who's better in this game, Steelers or Bengals? I'd be like, the Bengals are better. Steelers have been luckier. The Bengals have been less lucky this year.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I guess, so the question, if I had to pick one of these teams to win a single game, I think I'm going with the Steelers. I was trying to figure out how I would go with the Bengals, but I still think I'm going with the Steelers. Like, the issues that the Bengals have are like, it's big and systemic. It's not just the coaching. It's just like they actually are not good at football on defense. Like, it's
so bad.
It's not. I don't know. It feels like they're further away.
Yeah.
I don't hate the idea. One of the things about paying these two guys is they're going into their second contract, and I think sometimes it's important to recognize that guys who already have big contracts, if you're going into your third contract, often you're reducing the cap hit by extending them. You're definitely going to increase the cap hit on both of these guys by extending them. It is making a decision, but there are maneuvers that you can make. And they've looked good with just Chase out there at times. Like, it's a tough decision to make. It's a good problem to have, but it's a tough decision to make because it is making your team, like, more likely it's making you worse. And it is aiming with a quarterback like Joe Burrow, who does seem to have some injury concerns. Mm-hmm. You're potentially pushing off a run at the championship by moving on from T. Higgins, right?
I think so. I mean, like, here, the thing that this is something that I'd actually be fascinated to know your opinion on is you get new coaching in there. I think it's a fait accompli. Zach Taylor's most likely not going to be the coach next year. There have been rumors there's going to be Ben Johnson and how he's such a good fit with the offense. You could go in a defensive direction and hire an offensive guru, or how McVay had Wade Phillips initially running his defense, and it's been pretty hands off. And there are a bunch of different ways you could go, but defense is really fickle. This defense was good 2 years ago, and we were all praising Lou Anarumo. Like, how much of this is personnel that they just need to like have a way to make this defense good, or can you bring in new coaching that can make this group passable on the margins within a year with good coaching and let the offense carry this team?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like, everybody in the NFL is pretty good, and the difference between a great team and a good team and a good team and a bad team is really small. So, like, I think that it's a smaller gap, but you're going to have to hit in the draft. And I mean, that's honestly, I say that as if that's like a new concept.
That's for everyone.
Like, it kind of is true. Yeah, it's kind of true of everyone at any stage in your development. You're going to have some draft hits. No one's winning based solely on free agent acquisitions. Like, I guess the Rams are the only team that we could point to that got close to that, but they still had some hits in the draft.
They've hit on every pick also since they've gotten picks back. It's unbelievable.
Right. No, I know that, but I'm saying to win a championship. Like, that team was probably one of the older teams to win a championship. I would guess, like, off the top of my head, because I just remember them moving on from all those picks and acquiring people. But it's the fact of the NFL. The way it's constructed is you're going to have to get some guys to overperform their draft position and their salary cap hit at some point on your roster, and it's normally going to be young guys because their cap hit is artificially low. I think when you have an offense as good as they have, it's hard to turn your back on it. So, yeah, I think more than anything, I'd want to keep that unit together and try to figure out the rest of the stuff. Is like, don't break something that you think is already pretty great in order to try to improve something that you don't even know if you're going to improve it.
Or the pathway to improve it. Yeah. I mean, the Rams thing I always think is funny. There was so much of the F them pick stuff, but like, they did draft Aaron Donald. They did draft Cooper Kupp in like the third round.
No, the point that I'm making is not that they drafted him, but like there's normally some guys that are in their rookie deal on those championship teams. Those guys got drafted by him, but they were not in their rookie deals.
Definitely. That's totally fair. The one last thing I'd say about this is, what do you think the reaction is on that team if let's just say they're 4-8. Let's say the Steelers go in, they do the Mike Tomlin thing, they win this game, the Bengals somehow make it a 3-point game with a minute left, and we're like, wow, the Bengals have outplayed them, but they're going to lose this game again and drop to 4-8. If we've talked about the locker room vibes on Wednesday. If they go back on Wednesday to get ready for work, and Chase and T. Higgins are both just like, see ya, this, we'll be back when we get our check. What's the reaction to that stuff?
I mean, I think it depends a lot on how those players feel about Higgins and Chase. I think my guess is most of them want him to get paid, and they would understand why they would take a step back. But it's impossible also for that not to have some negative impact on the team. Like it's just, when you're as important to the team as they are, and you just stop showing up or stop participating and start planning for the future, like it's going to have a negative impact on the team going forward. I imagine that I would support them if they wanted to do that, but I find it hard to believe that Chase would do it, because we all know Chase is going to be there. Higgins, that's a different story. Higgins may not be there. I would get him being like, look, man, this ain't for me. But Chase is going to be there with his man Joe Burrow for the future. So I think he shows up. And he goes after that triple crown. But I think that's an interesting transition into the next conversation, being the Giants-Cowboys game. And the
culture
Giants, game. It's a culture off. Game. It's a culture off. So everybody in football gives the speech about culture all the time. You get a new coach, we got to change the culture. You get a new GM, we got to change the culture. The culture here is this, the culture here is that. And we talk a lot about culture here and organizational stability. And I think the decision that the Giants made last week to bench and then release Daniel Jones and start Tommy DeVito, was like indicative of a loser's culture. And I hate it as a decision because, first of all, I think we should be clear about what culture is. It's like the accepted processes and behaviors on a team. I played for 3 different teams in NFL. I've been in plenty of different organizations, and the culture is different everywhere. And I noticed that the organization, I fortunately played in organizations. I remember when I got to the Broncos, it was kind of required that the defense went to dinner. Every Thursday, the defense had to go to dinner. We all had to go to dinner in a private room in the back of Del Frisco's. It was like mandatory. And the coach, Shanahan, would not like implement it, but he would somehow know the guys that didn't show up. And that was about building team camaraderie and culture. And the same thing when I got to Baltimore. Ed would organize film sessions, and he would watch extra film, and he would come in having watched film with suggestions for things that we could do and we could change. And we all understood that's how it was supposed to be. And all of us did the same thing. And I hosted the film sessions, and I would come in with thoughts about, because that was the culture that was accepted. And that was you look like you have something to say.
No, it's just, I'm laughing that I think that the Giants literally got team culture and like Italian American New Jersey culture confused, and they're literally playing Tommy DeVito as a bit to their fans.
You are an expert in that particular culture. I was taught today that it's all in the wrist, and Baker Mayfield did it wrong because he did a lot of elbows and that like Italian hand gesture that he was mocking the Tommy DeVito.
Baker Mayfield looked like he was leading a marching band. He did not look like he wanted some gabagool.
It was hilarious, whatever it was. It was pretty funny. All right, so like the reason why that decision is so bad and so deleterious to potential team culture is you are sending a message. Can you imagine that we all recognize that it's important to do the extra work? It's important to go above and beyond. It's important to take risk and sometimes play while hurt or spend that extra time watching film or not go out on Friday night so you can be fully hydrated and rested for the weekend. These are things that are important to building a winning culture even when you're not winning. And when you are making a decision not only to bench the quarterback who is better because you're worried about saving a couple $1 million on the cap, and not only doing that, but skipping over obviously much more talented quarterback in Drew Lock to go to Tommy DeVito for whatever reason. People speculate that's because he was like a fan favorite last year. Like, that suggests to your team that you don't give a and you are just like, you're instilling and encouraging a culture of loserdom. So when I am faced with a decision about how I'm going to spend my free time, or faced with a decision on whether I'm going to risk my body in this situation or play through some pain, like, I am going to be impacted by the water that I swim in. And that water is losing water. The what you guys are pouring into this tank is loser and I don't understand how they can expect. And I remember a while ago, like, I got a lot of pushback from Dolphins fans, and I was wrong because I said the Dolphins were tanking. They ended up not tanking. But the reason why it upset me the most was not what people thought. It wasn't because I thought that, like, it was unsafe for the players that they were putting out there. Like, those are football players. They're fine. It was because I thought that it was unfair to their careers. Like, anytime that I got traded from the Broncos to the Falcons in my contract year. And that was when I first started thinking about business school, because the Falcons, Michael Vick had just gone to jail, and the Falcons had a rookie quarterback. And I knew then and I know now that you are much more likely to have success if you're on a good team, and you're much more likely to get paid if you're on a good team. I was so lucky that Matt Ryan was good. Like, that was good fortune. Yeah, immediately, too. Like, his first pass was, I think, a skinny to Jenkins that went for 6. Like, it was immediate good. We won a lot of games. We surprised people. We played in the playoffs, and people were like, hey, they had a really good corner down there on a winning team. Let's entertain it. And that's so unfair to all the players that are on this team now, that you are not giving them the best opportunity for their careers, and you expect them to put themselves at risk and to improve for you. And that stuff carries over. Like, it persists. And it's easy to pick out moments of bad culture. And this is the moment that I go to often to point out what good culture is the Steelers. And I know you know exactly what I'm going to say, because I've said it to you a number of times, is when the Steelers were starting to get to the end of their run and Ben Roethlisberger was constantly injured and not as good as he used to be. He got hurt early in the season. And I remember thinking, perfect. They are going to stink now because Ben is out, and they're going to be able to move up, or they're going to be high in the draft and draft a quarterback. You know what they did? Something that a lot of us thought was dumb. They traded away that first-round draft pick to get Minkah Fitzpatrick. Mm-hmm. And that is establishing in that building, like, this is a culture. We're not planning for the future. We're not sacrificing your time in order to improve ourselves. We are trying to make this team as good as possible all the time. And maybe you could argue that was a mistake, but it's hard to argue that sustaining and making decisions that encourage and reinforce the type of culture of winners and sacrifice is a good decision all the time, even if you're missing out on the things that us in the media and us fans that think are hugely valuable, because we can count them. Like, it's easy to say that games or that draft picks are valuable because we can count it. It's hard to value how important it is to make a decision that reinforces a culture of winners and sacrifice. And what the Giants are doing is loser and I hate it so much for their players, and I hate it so much for their organization.
A TLDR on the Steelers culture, by the way, is like Mike Tomlin effectively manages George Pickens and effectively managed Antonio Brown, Ben Roethlisberger, and Le'Veon Bell. It's pretty amazing stuff. When he just
and I think the water analogy is a good one, because I do think that you you breathe it, you live in it, you exist in it, and it helps. It helps. Some of these players in different situations, as we saw them in different situations, are not the same. I think that right now we're getting the best version of the Steelers, and we always get the best version of the Steelers. And I understand why people say that it's not a championship culture anymore. I think that you're optimizing what you have there. And yeah, the Ravens is another example of a team that is consistently has this culture. Like we call it organizational stability on this podcast sometimes, but it's all the same thing. It's a place that you can trust. It's a place that you know is going to get the best out of you, and you're going to behave. I think we all recognize that you talk different and you act different depending on which group you're in. And sometimes when that group is a positive one, you'll get a better version of yourself.
It's amazing that we're in a Giants Cowboys game, and the Giants are the team with bad culture. With everything that's gone on in Dallas this year.
The Cowboys fought. They fought last week, and they got to win.
Yeah. And Jerry's talked about maybe Mike McCarthy's not totally the problem, and X, Y, and Z. But I mean, actually, before we get to the Cowboys, the Giants stuff I think is interesting because we've talked about the Malik Neighbors stuff. He's one of the most promising young receivers we've seen in a long time. Of course, his production has dropped off as their season has gone to hell, and he's just kind of been pretty honest that he's like a winner and he's kind of stuck in like a loser organization doing loser right now. I mean, I don't think it was the most tact to say that he would like to play with Jaden Daniels or refusing to sit with the other receivers, but I totally get it. But I mean, to me, it's just so exemplary that if you can lose a player who's getting, all of this praise by 12 weeks into the season, that is a messed up culture. I don't think it's all on Brian Daboll. I think this is organization down. And I say this as a Commanders fan who has watched this. Like, if you're rotten to the core, it takes you have to cut that out and start anew. And I don't know, you would know better than me, but the steps of fixing that, coaching, GM, et cetera, because it doesn't feel like the Maras are like this unstable ownership group the way that Snyder was or Tepper is.
Yeah, I think it's clear. So the tough thing is some of the things that Neighbors has said and done, I think in isolation can be frustrating or seem frustrating to fans and media, but also it can be viewed as maybe this guy's just not a loser, and he hates that around him he's watching people behave like losers. And I think your point about saying that this is a perceived stable organization. So there's a couple different things. Is if you're not loud and messy, people will give you the benefit of the doubt. We tend to think that rich and successful people are also smart and reasonable, and the Maras and the Giants in general is it looks like a buttoned up organization, and they've won a couple Super Bowls that frankly, there were seasons that they probably didn't have Super Bowl caliber teams, that it puts a gloss on the culture of this team that I don't think actually exists. You could go through their history also, recent and distant history, and point to lots of decisions that were made that seem like loser decisions. Like the Saquon decision is one. They were out of it last year, and they kept Saquon and didn't trade him, do anything with him. They moved on from Leonard Williams and McKinney and guys who are playing really well elsewhere without while also signing Daniel Jones to going forward. And frankly, they never actually gave Daniel Jones a good chance, a legitimate chance. They've spent a lot of money and time trying to address the offensive line and never actually fixed it. They just got him a number one receiver, a legit number one receiver this year. And so I think because he's not loud or out there like Pepper, Tepper and Jerry Jones and Daniel Snyder, and not doing egregiously horrible things. People assume that you look at him, he's hey, an old white guy in a suit, he must be reasonable. But that they doing is stupid. You remember when they benched Eli because he wasn't good anymore, and then let the fan pressure? They had Geno Smith, who is obviously a good quarterback. He's second in the league in passing right now in yards. He's a good quarterback. They had him and decided, and it was clear that he was better, but because the fans got upset, he was oh no, let's do some loser again, and let's put Eli back out there and continue to lose because the fans want Eli. This is loser, man. It's loser. right?
It's 100% loser.
That's all. It's just like
you just raised the funniest point. The line cannot be being a putrid human being for Daniel Snyder. That cannot be the line for others, and I cannot believe that I've been conditioned to be like, well, you're not Daniel Snyder.
Yeah.
Like, look at that upstanding citizen.
Yeah, like just because he's not committing crimes doesn't mean that he is running this organization well. That's all.
I've been broken by that. By being raised in the darkness.
It is true. Yeah, we talked about this a bunch. Where you think that I'm trying to trick you into being a legitimate fan only so I can laugh at you when you lose? No,
that's right.
I want you to feel real fan happiness. Like, it's okay. I don't want to laugh at you when you lose. I want you to be happy when you win and be sad when you lose because it's the way it is. Like, you've just been ruined by growing up in this awful situation. And the culture. So, like, it's interesting because the Cowboys have a distinct culture. I don't know that I would call it a winning culture, but they've had a lot of success with this culture. And one thing I can say for them is they are not starting a quarterback for no reason. Like, they have a quarterback on their roster that I think a lot of people would like to see play a lot more often in Trey Lance, but they recognize he ain't good enough. He ain't better than Cooper Rush. So they ran Cooper Rush out there and they did a remedial offense and got a win. You know what? The Giants ran Tommy DeVito out there because they thought it was going to fill the stands or something. I don't know, because it's certainly like the disrespect to Drew Lock. Like, it just, and not just Drew Lock, everybody on the team.
Yeah.
Who wants to win? Who cares?
It was reported in the offseason that Drew Lock signed there because they said he would start at some point this year.
Right. And now we're at the point when you should start him, and you put Tommy DeVito out there, who was like, okay, they won some games last year with Tommy DeVito at quarterback. It wasn't because of Tommy DeVito.
And
like, the defense was unconscious.
They also immediately put Tyrod Taylor in
in that
Tommy
Saints
DeVito's
game
spot and were a million times better. And it's not like Tyrod's fine. He's fine.
Yeah.
He's a fine backup or like low end starting quarterback. But if you're winning with Tyrod Taylor and Tommy DeVito's a huge step down, just play the real professional football player as quarterback. Like, come on.
Yeah. And I mean no disrespect to Tommy DeVito or his goofy agent, but like,
I'm starting to feel bad for Tommy DeVito when he was basically. There's room for the empathy there, Dominique, because he was basically when they decided to start him, he was like, I don't want to be a sideshow.
Yeah.
But he's become one.
And that's just, if that's a question that you have to answer, that's absurd. Yeah. And I'm in New York with this beautiful, look at that. Look how beautiful this city is right behind me. Great, beautiful city. 2 garbage teams.
If you're watching on YouTube, Dominique's background is now just a beautiful sunset. Gorgeous, I had to move to my guest bedroom because of internet issues, but I found desk milk duds.
Yeah, I wasn't going to tell on you because the YouTube audience might have seen, I don't know how Brian edited this, but my man Charlie has been popping milk duds since he changed locations.
These are so underrated. When was the last time you had a dud?
I've probably had milk duds so milk duds aren't good, man. I had milk duds when I was a kid and was like, oh no, if I want to have candy, this ain't it. I could have Reese's. I could have Sour Patch Kids. Milk duds ain't man.
They're an elite. They are certainly not elite, but I hadn't had a dud in a long time.
Well, I mean, you are stuck in this room and the only thing in front of you is duds. Like, maybe a dud is I mean, it's in the name. They're duds.
I'm just going to tell you, if I were able to pop this little milk dud through the screen, you'd be like, not bad.
Yeah, I'll give milk duds, Tyrod Taylor, milk duds. Like, not bad. But I mean, I'm not knocking down no walls moving up in the draft to get milk duds.
No. Speaking of that, the Reese's of quarterback prospects. You want to talk about Bears Lions, another Thanksgiving game?
You know what I had recently? I had the deep cup Reese's. Oh, so good. So good. So much peanut butter. Oh my gosh. I don't love chocolate, but if you mix it with peanut butter,
it's an all-time combination. Also, Reese's peanut butter, I'm not sure what it is. If it's like part chocolate, peanut butter, powdered sugar, it's just amazing.
But I mean, that sound that I made when I just started thinking about the Reese's deep cups, the same sound I made when I was watching Caleb Williams throw footballs that no one else very few people in the world could throw. Like the Caleb Williams game right now, they're going up against the Lions, which is, I think, interesting because Thomas Brown has kind of changed the way that we think about Caleb Williams.
Mhm.
Thomas Brown is the new offensive coordinator who replaced Shane Waldron. And since he's taken over, even though they haven't won, Caleb has looked both good and amazing. I don't know if that makes sense, but the point that I'm making is he's been like serviceable in the traditional stuff. Like he's just good. And then he's also had like 3 or 4 throws in this last game alone that were just amazing passes. And it's so encouraging and exciting. Going up against the Lions, who have a good defense, will be another test for both Thomas Brown and Caleb Williams, which I'm looking forward to this game. That's what I'm looking forward to most out of this game. Like the Lions are going to win because they've been steamrolling everybody. I suspect they will continue to do the same, but I don't think they'll steamroll them. Like the Bears defense will be better, and I think Caleb will make some plays against that like man coverage heavy Lions defense that doesn't get a great bit of pressure, but blitzes a lot.
Yeah. So, I mean, the Caleb stuff to me is really interesting because I think that we collectively blew it as the way that we talked about him earlier in the year, where we were breaking down every single throw. And it was like there was such a rush to protect the prospect evaluation that we weren't wanting to admit that at that time he wasn't playing well. Like he's not good now. The offense wasn't good. And then he had those couple games where he was performing better. But one of those against the Jaguars in London and these bad teams, and like the stats felt artificial, and then he fell back into his funk. The last 2 weeks playing better teams and performing better, even in losses. This is the most exciting it's been. And a friend of the show, Ben Solak, wrote about, the style of trying to make him an orthodox quarterback so that he has more wiggle room. And Thomas Brown has basically been like, do your special like this year is about you getting comfort. I think it's a really interesting topic because obviously you want him to develop some of that quarterback orthodoxy that he can make the easy plays. But just seeing him be an exciting quarterback and use his athleticism and his arm talent, and those plays are not going to go his way. Like the 5 throws that were mind blowing last week, those are not going to go his way every week.
Right.
Like period. I mean, I know Patrick Mahomes has had a horseshoe up his whole career and has made it last longer than a lot of people. But like for the most part, some of those throws are going to hit the turf. But just seeing that prospect that we all wanted to be so precious
or
about
not
has been really exciting,
which is worse.
Yeah,
or
to the other
turnover.
team.
Yeah. So you've been pushing this and trying to sell this for a while now that we messed up on the way that we were evaluating Caleb early on, and I don't think it's true. Like I think this is evidence that we were right. Like what we were saying about Caleb was like, look, these are bad games. The structure that he's playing in is not great. He's still showing the greatness, and now we're starting to see it, right?
But see, that's where I disagree because people were taking it as you can't say that he's playing poorly at a given time because that affects what you think of him moving forward. Like it's not about him as the prospect. It's not about him as a talent. It's just acknowledging that, this was a high floor prospect who we thought was going to come in and be good immediately. And the offense that he was playing in at that time was really bad and he wasn't playing well. That doesn't mean that he's not still going to be excellent. I think that people were really afraid to talk about that stuff.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, I guess this is probably not all that interesting.
Yeah.
For us to have
we're picking nits.
This particular argument, but I think that they're one and the same. And the fact of the matter is, he's now showing all the things that we expected him to be able to show, and that's the exciting part. And now he's going to go up against, and he's done it against good teams. Like it's not. Yeah. Now he's going to do it against the best, and that's an exciting matchup in a showcase type game.
I think that the Lions have reached the 2023 49ers zone. We're actually getting bored by their offense. They just go out there and just run over everyone. It's just an expectation at this point. And like, yeah, they have some hard games down the stretch, but they're playing the Bears twice. They're just awesome. Like they're such an aesthetic team to watch. Like I would be shocked even if this is a blowout, if it's a boring game. Watching the Lions and those running backs and seeing Caleb Williams play in this game, it's going to be. I would be stunned if this isn't a good watch early on Thanksgiving.
Oh, it's so great to have like one of the teams that are in the consistent Thanksgiving situation. Like the Lions have always been bad, and always had a Thanksgiving game. It's nice. My cousin's here visiting for Thanksgiving. He lives in Detroit, so I was having this conversation with him, and I'm sure this will resonate with you some, being that you're a Commanders fan. He's from Baltimore like me, and he recognizes the difference in where you are in your fan evolution, comparing the Ravens
Mm-hmm.
fans to the Lions fans, and that last year, the heartbreaking loss for the Lions in the playoffs, everyone in Detroit was still so happy. It's like they have been beat down for so long, and they're like, oh, this is cool. And like, it's cool for us all to watch the Lions fans. It's like, I don't know. I don't know what the analogy it is, but it's childlike almost. And while the Ravens fans are at a different place, they've been good for so long. Lamar's been great for so long that the Ravens fans are like, oh, yeah, we'll win. Yeah, this is good. And it's also like, but we'll see when we get to the playoffs. Like, God, can't we just, and I don't blame them. Like, I get it, but it's also like, there's something between like being the Chiefs and being the Lions, and it just is a really unhappy place to be sometimes.
Yeah, one of our producers, producer Brian, is a Lions fan.
Yeah.
He's a lunatic. He's our lunatic. But I'm on a text thread with all of his high school friends from a fantasy basketball league, and I don't know if being Michigan fans deluded them. They all just think that they're winners. They didn't get broken by. They didn't get broken by like an evil organization the way that we did. Like, so they came back and they're like, oh yeah, of course we start winning. We're good.
Yeah, like but talks to my cousin about like being excited to go to like Pistons game. He's like, yeah, they're not great, but like Kate Cunningham's fun and like they're talented. Like they don't play much defense. It's fun to watch. It's just like a happy, like the way that we think about Detroit. Like it's just like a happy fan place to be.
I wish I could be a Detroit fan. I'm on this text thread and they're talking about Asar Thompson and Cade Cunningham, and I'm like, what? I hated everyone I've had to root for my whole life. Like,
yeah, I mean Jordan Poole and Kyle Kuzma, Bradley Beal, John Wall. Man, that's your history, man. You were too young to appreciate the Jordan years.
I mean those were the best years, and then the Gilbert Arenas, Antoine Jameson, Cron Butler years. Those are awesome.
Those are fun.
Those are the most fun sports fan times. But yeah, no, I mean I'm super jealous of the Detroit fans. They have such a good attitude. They have so much joy. Like Brian's a goldfish. Producer Brian's a goldfish. He just only knows the good times now.
And they like the Detroit fans do a Jared Goff chant, which is just like the cutest thing ever. Where they're like, "That's our guy, man. We know." And you've seen it, I'm sure, at like pregame shows and stuff. They'll just start going Jared Goff. Before he got paid, they were rooting for him. They were all celebrated because I think we were in Detroit for the draft, I think, around the time when Jared Goff got his deal, I think, if I remember correctly. And everyone's just so happy there. It's nice. It's good for them.
You know what? We're happy for them.
Yeah, we're happy for them. I mean, it won't last. I mean, they'll either fall off and they'll be mad again. They could just
win the Super Bowl this year and they're good forever.
Yeah, that's the thing is, that's like that's what happened with the Wolverines, right? It's like, they stink right now and no one cares really.
Yeah, but they signed Bryce Underwood. They signed the guy that we're going to be talking about in 3 years. Like he's the next Caleb Williams.
That's pretty awesome. Goodness. But yeah, I mean, hopefully they win a championship because the bad place to be in, it's still a great place to be in, but the bad place to be in is where the regular season becomes a foregone conclusion and you expect to win, but all that matters is how you win in the single elimination tournament. Is just a tough spot to be in, man.
Yeah. All right, let's keep it moving. And we exhausted Detroit.
Can't get enough Detroit. They make us happy. All right, what do you want to do now? You want to do Dolphins Packers? You want to do Chargers Falcons?
Ooh, can we do Dolphins Packers and talk? I call this the lurk game. Both these teams are just lurking around.
Is this like your like compulsion to name games? Is like give games names? Is this like a Bill Simmons influence on you, or is it broader than that? You just like because you named all these games. You just named the culture game earlier. Now it's the lurker game.
I like my brain categorizes things the way that Simmons would have written a chapter in his book or an article back in the day on Grantland. I can't get it out of me.
All right, cool. All right, tell me about the lurker game. Why is it the lurker game, and what about it is interesting to you?
The Packers are 8-3, and we don't talk about them at all. They're a team that coming into the year we thought it was going to be this huge step for Jordan Love. The stupid game in Brazil in week 1, he gets hurt. Christian Watson gets hurt. Mm-hmm. You know, he has 11 interceptions. And he's missed a significant amount of time. He'd probably be leading the league in interceptions if he had played all those games. He'd also probably be leading the league in touchdowns. I think our perception of the Packers is just off because they're not the team we thought they were going to be. Like their DVOA says they're a good team. All the analytics say they're a good team, but they are become a run-first team because of how erratic the quarterback play is, whether or not you think that's because of injury or you think it's just because that's closer to who Jordan Love is at this point of his career. But they're the team in the NFC, not, to me, the Vikings. They're the team in the NFC that's sort of lurking behind the Eagles and the Lions. Is like they could up in the playoffs.
I mean,
Like,
we
they're
saw
that-
them do it last year.
Yeah.
I mean, they destroyed the Cowboys, and then they played above their head in the 49ers game and probably should have won that game also. So, like, I think it's fair to consider them a team like that. The problem with them is, and we say this anytime we talk about them, is their quarterback is only in his second year. He's older and he's more mature.
Bo Nick's age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we think about him in a way that I think, and he was so good in those playoff games, and he was so good down the stretch last year, as we expected that to continue. And so we know that it's in there, and that's what makes the team really scary because their defense has been, it's been good. Like it's been very good actually. I think if you take the turnovers out, they're not as good, but they're still a good enough defense for a team that has the ability to like be outstanding on offense. So, like, yeah, I think it's a fair point that they are a team that could be quite scary in the playoffs. I think they're outside the top teams because of that inconsistency. But the thing that Jordan Love has is a ridiculous arm, and that arm gets him in trouble sometimes because he tries to make throws that you can't make consistently, but he makes them enough that I understand why he wants to try to do that. And then moving on to the Dolphins, it's very different when you're considering arm strength, but it's a similar setup in that they have an offense that has a ceiling that's out of this world when they hit it, and a defense that's pretty good.
Yeah, and they're also lurking. Like this team,
right? Which is why you call this the lurker game.
Yeah, 30th in pass DVOA, weeks 1 through 7, 9th since. Like 2 in the 5 games coming back from injury, almost 1,300 yards, 11 touchdowns, 1 interception, completing almost 80% of his passes. And it's another thing where it's lurking because we assume the Dolphins offense is going to run through Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. And I know that Jalen Waddle went nuts last week. It has been run through Devon Achane and Jonnu Smith. But this is a team that we left for dead. They are 5-6 in a wide open AFC where, yes, we know who the 3 best teams are. We know it's the Chiefs, the Bills, and the Ravens. But we also know that the gap between those teams, because of how flawed they are, is smaller than it was in years past. This is another team that's lurking that's just going to be like, what happens if they have a game where Tyreek Hill goes for 200 yards in a wild card round playoff game? It's so distinctly possible. They have so much unique offensive talent.
So one of those 3 teams, the Chiefs, the Ravens, or the Bills, is going to lose to a team that's worse than them. Like I don't imagine that they're all going to like play each other, and like I don't know how these playoffs are going to like shape up, but like one of those teams is going to lose a game that they're not supposed to lose. And I think that the Dolphins are capable of being that team. But, and I always spend these Tuesdays, a lot of them with Jeff, so I'm influenced by his thought process. And you would think that he would be on board with the idea that the Dolphins in cold weather is a different version of the team. But since he had that Colts experience and they were in a dome, he despises the idea of saying a dome team or warm weather team is soft. However, these numbers don't lie. And so this is an opportunity for the Dolphins to go and break whatever mental block that they might have, because they're going to be playing a night game. And I played an 8:00 game in Lambeau in December one time. It wasn't the coldest game I played in, but it sucked.
Yeah. I mean, Jeff, you're not soft. We know you're not soft. You don't need to project it. It's okay.
So you're saying that to say that you do believe the weather matters to the Dolphins, because it's going to be hard for the Dolphins to be the team that knocks off one of those 3 teams, because the Dolphins aren't going to be the higher seed. They're going to have to go to a cold place.
It definitely seems like it matters for that team. And like, am I jaded by the past? Am I jaded by the Browns game last year?
The Kansas City game.
Kansas City game where they just completely were terrible.
But that game was like ridiculously cold. Like, Patrick Mahomes' helmet broke because it was so damn cold. Like, that's another level of cold.
Do you remember that fullback, Owen Schmidt from West Virginia, who kept breaking his face mask?
I did not. No, I didn't.
I think he played in the NFL for a little while afterwards, but I remember seeing there was like a SportsCenter special where it's like, Owen Schmidt, this is like before we knew everything about concussions, has broken 6 face masks this season for he was the fullback on the Steve Slayton, Pat White, West Virginia teams. Different era. I don't think we'd be celebrating the fact that he literally mashed his face in a half dozen times this season. Speaking of that, that's a very Jim Harbaugh transition. Last game we should talk about is Chargers Falcons. Not the most exciting game of the weekend, but I bring this up because you were early on the Chargers, that they're better than we thought, and the Chargers are maybe a step ahead of where we actually thought they were or should be given the talent level on this team. But after the last 2 weeks where, they beat the Bengals, but they gave up a bunch of points and they lost to the Ravens in a game that the Ravens controlled. Are you fully off this Chargers team?
No, I think we've done a really good job of like accurately evaluating teams, both of us. And I think that we were early on the Chargers. I was early on the Chargers. You agreed, because it was before people started to recognize that they were good. And then we have this problem, and it's the way that the sports media cycle works, in that like it moves so fast that you can't say a good thing about somebody, because then someone will say a great thing about them. Then someone else will say an amazingly impressive thing about them in order to like keep the thing going. But like, I think this team is ahead of schedule. I think they're pretty good. I think they're about as good as I thought they were before. They're in that lurker category that you mentioned before, that I was like, I think they'll probably make the playoffs and they could surprise somebody, maybe, but they're early in this rebuild. And so, my opinion of them hasn't changed because they lost to the Ravens, who are a more well-developed team and like a more serious outfit. So like, my opinion hasn't changed on them. I still think that they are well coached enough and talented enough and physical enough to maybe knock somebody off in the playoffs, but like, they're not a real contender. I think, ironically, one of the teams that I was most wrong about preseason is probably the Falcons. Is like, I thought they'd be more consistently good, and they have not been. They've been very Falcony, honestly. It's like, we're really good sometimes, we're really bad other times, and it hasn't been, consistent enough.
They're the weirdest team. I just don't understand the skill position. I mean, Drake London's had a great year. That's the one that we didn't expect. And I guess Pitts has had but like, just weird the way that, their star players are used.
Bijan is so awesome, though, man. It's like,
if we learned anything from the Saquon situation, it's don't give up on that guy.
Yeah, Bijan, he might be the guy who ends up somewhere in year 5 or 6, and it's just like breaking. I mean, it might be in Atlanta. I imagine if they keep the general manager there, like, he would keep him because he did draft him and probably does believe in him. Do you have a name for the Falcons? So you consider them lurkers also? Because they're probably, they don't really want to win their division, but they still could win their division because their division is like Baker and a bunch of unserious outfits, right?
Yeah, this is just like the unserious, serious game.
Yeah.
Is really what it feels like. It's like these teams they're just misses.
I feel like the Chargers, they're kind of mirror images, or I guess maybe not mirror images. I don't know. Yin and yang is the example, because it's like the Chargers, I think, are playing better than their talent suggests.
Yeah.
And the Falcons are the opposite. And we are like, hey.
The Falcons are a Kirk Cousins team. Like, they play good against the bad teams and bad against the good teams. It's the same story, which is like, he's a very good player. He's a very good quarterback, but it's been the same story for a long time.
I haven't really been up on like Falcons news. Is there any Michael Penix discussion, or has Kirk Cousins been playing good enough for it not to be a realistic conversation?
Penix went into that blowout, and I think people are going to be ready for it in the coming years. But no, I think Cousins has been fine. It's been same old. And the Chargers, like, honestly, this is the fun part. This is the come up. They're ahead of schedule. We know Harbaugh's a really good coach, and Herbert's gotten on the right track.
They're a year or two away from being in Detroitville, in Lionstown, where we're just having fun. Expectations are too high. We haven't been good. The problem is they only got 13 fans. And so there's no fan base to be around.
they'll get the Detroit fans though because Harbaugh in Michigan.
No,
Depending on
Detroit.
where the Lions are in their life cycle.
Have you changed at all before we move on and let everyone enjoy their Thanksgiving and let me go? I'm going to have sushi with my cousin. I miss him. He's the best. He's a listener of the show too. He said that sometimes he starts his meetings at work with off tops now, except they're not. It's just a way to start the meeting. They're not.
It's a great icebreaker.
Yeah, they're not facts. He doesn't look up facts or anything like that. He just does like a weird non sequitur. Where it's just like, yeah.
I was just imagining him being like, I'm starting some serious meeting, being like, barnacle penises are twice their body length.
Play the music. No, I think I could call him in here and ask him to give us an example, but he told me that he just starts the meeting oftentimes with like a weird non sequitur. I don't know, like something funny about one of his coworkers, and breaks the ice, makes everybody comfortable. Yeah, it is brilliant. I wonder who came up with that idea. Anyway, I wanted to close with this question for you, because I was alone on Michael Penix drafting was a good decision island. With Kirk Cousins doing what he's doing this year, would you be willing to join me? And I understand that you believe that signing him in drafting was the issue.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're in the same same spot where I'm like, if Michael Penix is really good, I'm going to look like an idiot for being like, oh, the process was bad. But I'll still believe that the process is bad. He shouldn't have signed Kirk Cousins for $50 million a year if he wanted to draft a 25-year-old quarterback.
Right. But my only pushback is I think that, and when I went on Dan Patrick's show a few weeks ago, and I don't know if I articulated it clearly, because the point I was trying to make, I forgot what topic we were talking about, but I was making a point about you can't essentially about analytics. It's like you can't follow the model all the time if you want to be great. And it's like broader for like business and life in general. Is like you got to take a chance if you want to like hit a home run, for lack of a better analogy. And I think the running back conversation is not a perfect, but an imperfect analog for this situation. Is like, yeah, this is kind of, it goes against the conventional design, and it's a unconventional decision that I can get behind. Unconventional decisions that I can't get behind is benching quarterbacks because of injury guarantees.
It just, to me, it's like it's a really weird situation where they continue to use top 10 picks on guys they don't want to use in their rookie contract.
Right.
And like I just fundamentally disagree with that.
Yeah. It's suboptimal, right?
Yeah,
for sure.
Which is like, not to say, it's not that any of those picks in a vacuum like are bad. It's the way the whole thing was run.
Yeah.
It's not to say it's not going to work out. Like Penix, based on we're on the verge of this being a historic rookie quarterback class.
Right.
Like all the guys who have played have been good. So the odds are, I mean, actually you shouldn't say the odds are, because each one's individual. But if the evaluations for Penix are really above Nick's and stuff, he's probably gonna be good.
It's funny though, because it does kind of feel like it happens in bunches, right? Is this like it's
cluster
fair?
theory?
It feels like, I mean, it feels like the drafts that we have good quarterbacks is often like 2 or 3. It's rarely like just one guy can play in this quarterback class. I don't know. I'm on board with it because it makes it seem like it's going to be a pick that works out.
Next time we have David Epstein on, we can talk about cluster theory and my theory that there are now generational athletes stay around as the next generational athlete comes up because of sports medicine. We'll get there eventually.
I love that. Yeah, that's an off-season conversation maybe.
Yeah.
Or a bonus episode.
So, yeah.
All right. Enjoy your milk duds. Everyone else, enjoy your Thanksgiving. Thank you, I guess. I feel appropriate, like not on a genuine note. Like I really appreciate everybody who works on this show and everyone who makes this show as popular as it is, which is pretty popular. I get people coming up to me on the street now talking about the podcast and not talking about like First Take and Get Up. Like a couple times, like, I'm listening to you right now. That's always pretty cool. I'm
genuinely thankful for everyone as well. And a special shout out to Al at Sibley Hospital, who was with me last week. It was a show listener. That was
Shout
really
out
cool.
Al. I can't wait. I'm going to go see Al. Give him a hug. All right. Thanks again, Charlie. Thanks to all the great producers. I love you, Podville. We out.
This is the Domonique Foxworth Show.